Take a tour of the pole barn where a lot of the old tractors are stored for the winter. Start with the tractor that started it all, the 35 Farmall F12. Now technically it should be gray given the year and when IH switched to red paint. However, when we took it apart and sanded it all down, we did not find one speck of gray paint under anything. It was always red. And International would paint the tractor any color you wanted as long as you wanted to pay for it. So I got this tractor Dad bought in the early 90s for me from Claire Strum. Was at the Slope County Fair, and Claire talked with me and spent a lot of time explaining to a little boy how all these old tractors and engines worked. So this was the first one we bought from Claire Strum. And we bought the Farmall F14 to go with it. This is my brother's tractor. These were both repainted in the early 90s. The F12, we went through the engine. The F14 was in good running shape, so we just painted it up. They need to be taken out of here and cleaned up when I have the time and the motivation. An old farm truck and some snowmobiles in here. The grain vac. And we have a Farmall C. It was at an auction sale. I was bidding on it and got to a point where it was more than I could afford. So I quit. And then my dad bought it. He had the generator rebuilt, and I've changed the oil. That's about all we've done with it. We use it quite a bit now to move stuff in and out of buildings. That's why I put a Optima battery on it. It starts better. Put a bracket on the side so it's easy to borrow the battery for other tractors. It has Super C decals on it, but it is just a C. It doesn't have the water pump or the larger radiator. Unique thing is the wide front end. You don't see a whole lot of C's with that. Have a grain screener, an air compressor rig. This is my 42 Farmall H that I rebuilt in the early 2000s. Has a Spico wide front end that I took off of a 450 and made the brackets to fit the frame, modified the steering arm to fit the H. I built my own hydraulic system. Had a machine shop make me a pulley for the crankshaft that has a roll pin through it to drive the pump. It's about 12 gallons per minute, and it'll put out close to 1,000 pounds of pressure before the belt slips. Have a priority valve and Charlin power steering under the hood. I used the original belly tank for a reservoir. It has a International 1110 fully mounted mower, the balanced head, 7-foot bar on it. This also has an Optima 6-volt battery, spins them over really quick. I have been through the engine from top to bottom. And then back here is a Farmall A that we also bought from Claire Strum. We've had that for quite a few years too. Kind of looks nice with the grill painted white like the later 50 series tractors. I used to use this all the time for mowing and raking road ditches. So we got something bigger when I built my H. No, it still runs, but it ends up sitting most of the time. An 1100 pull type International mower with a balanced head. Then we have an 806 diesel standard. We bought this from Frank Kilwine. He was a very good International mechanic that worked in New England for many, many years. This tractor originally belonged to, trying to think of the name, a Hanson by New England. And my uncle operated this tractor probably when he was in high school in the early 60s. We took the cab off of it. We use it for grain augers, mowing, raking, moving stuff around the yard. You have another 42 Farmall H. This one my dad had in the 70s. He rebuilt the engine. He had a wide front from the back of a combine that he made work, so he could have a wide front end. It's back to a narrow front right now. Someday I wish I could find that combine front end, put back under it. But he had this in the 70s and sold it to a relative in the Badlands, and I bought it back in the early 2000s. So it's nice to keep it in the family. And I have a 6-foot finish mower that I pull with it. Doesn't have a 3-point, so I just bolted arms onto the drawbar, and it makes for a very nice yard mower. This one still has the original 6-volt system on it that works well. That's very interesting to also be a 42 model like my H. Couple of differences. This one is on cut-off steel wheels. Show you what that looks like. So this was probably when the shortages started with the war in later 42. So it was originally on steel and they cut them off and welded rims on. It has a pressurized radiator cap, where my 42 has just the water cap and a non-pressure system. And it also has the later style PTO instead of the flat back PTO. And we'll stick with internationals here. This is a W-9 I bought from a neighbor. It is in running condition with a little bit of tinkering. It's just been put on the back burner for quite a few years. But the engine's loose and it will run with some work. And I have all the tin for it. Again, it's just a matter of time and motivation to get to it. This one is a 1944 John Deere B. Belonged to my great uncle, Ray Ming. My dad ran this when he was young, and his cousins ran it. A neighbor owned it for many, many years. We tried to buy it back a few times. It was never for sale. And here last summer in 2019, it was on an auction sale, and I bought it back. And it is in running condition. It needs a bull gear replaced, and the usual tinkering on a 70-year-old tractor. I have passed it on back to the family that it came from. My dad's cousin bought it back, and it's going to go to Oregon sometime when we get trucking lined up, but it's back in the family where it belongs, and I'm glad I could do that. So we got things nice and tucked away in here, and room for more. I have that other M that's going to have to fit in here eventually when I get it done.